I'd like to introduce Diane Andrews with Lincoln Financial. She's going to speak to us about generational transfer on the farm. Diane grew up on the family farm in Northwest Iowa. She has a BS degree from Iowa State and an MBA in Finance and Marketing from the University of Chicago. She is a certified financial planner and a member of the Estate Planning Council. Her education and life experiences have developed an understanding of the complex financial issues and provides Diane with the technical skills to find financial solutions to the challenges that face agribusiness owners and farm owners. I'd like to welcome Diane to the podium, and she'll be making her presentation. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Joel. I'd like to thank the Dairy Business and Dairy Profit team and the Pro Dairy organization for hosting these seminars and giving us the opportunity to come and speak with you today. Welcome to Empire Farm Days, and hopefully the weather will be nice today and everything will dry out a little bit for us. So again, I'm thrilled to be here today representing Lincoln Financial Advisors Agribusiness Services. I wanted to give you an overview of the issues involved in planning for the succession of your farming or agribusiness operation. A situation that we commonly run into is the belief that we're all set. And frankly, this is a warning because that belief can be dangerous. However, there's a few administrative items first before I get into the presentation. Each of you were handed a contact card when you came into the tent today, and we'd appreciate it if you there's a pin in your sack, and if you use that pin and complete these cards. And at the end of the presentation, I have a number of associates here. If you can just hand your cards, provide those to you before you exit the tent. If you haven't received a card, please just let me know. Did everybody receive one? Okay, great. There'll be time to answer questions after the presentation, or if you have specific operational questions, we'd be happy to talk with you individually after this presentation. Yeah, we have a booth here over in the corner, and as well, we also have a second booth at the Northwest main tent, so please stop by. We'd be happy to talk with you. First of all, as you know, I'm Diane Andrews, and I'd like to introduce my colleagues that are here. If you would please stand up. First of all, we have Bill Wright in the white shirt. He is Director of Lincoln Financial Advisors Agribusiness Services. We're very happy to have him here with us today. And then we have planners Charlton and Dan Jeffrey, and then my assistant, Jill Shelton. So again, we are all part of Lincoln Financial Advisors Agribusiness Services. See if I can get rid of that. We are all part of Lincoln Financial Advisors Agribusiness Services, which is a select group of estate and succession planning specialists skilled in utilizing strategies for protecting land, business, and one's legacy while minimizing their tax consequences and inheritance issues. We possess advanced technical skills coupled with a passion for the agribusiness market. Lincoln Financial Advisors is part of the Lincoln Financial National Corporation, a Fortune 500 business with a 109-year-old history. We have a national footprint, and we work throughout the United States. I'm sure you've heard, or at least read, the prognostications about the future of the family farm. But let's review them a bit here. 70% of the U.S. farmland will change hands in the next 20 years. If a farm family hasn't adequately planned for succession, it's likely to go out of business, be absorbed into ever larger farming neighbors, or be converted to non-farm uses. Now, I'm sure all of you know about examples of this. In fact, I'm sure many of you have parcels of property named something like the Jones Farm. So how many of you in the audience today plan on transferring your farm to the next generation? Let's just get a show of hands. part of the presentation. So I have several members here. Well, studies have found that the odds, unfortunately, are not in your successor's favor. In fact, it says that studies have found that 2/3 of the first generation farms will fail to successfully transition from the first generation to the second generation. And then 9/10 of second generation farms will fail to successfully transition from the second to the third generation. So if you run the numbers, I know this is kind of scary. If you run the numbers, that means that 3 farms out of 100 will successfully transfer to the grandchildren. So our goal at Lincoln Financial Advisors Agribusiness Services is to work with farm families to meet these odds. One big reason for succession failure is that the founders simply never bothered to plan for the transfer of the farming operation. And in fact, according to the American Family Business Survey, 19% of family business participants have not completed any estate planning other than writing a will. And 37%, only 37%, have a written strategic plan. So I'm going to assume that since you are here and you've made the effort to be here today, that you intend to be one of those who has a plan. Which is wise, because as someone said, failing to plan is really planning to fail. Given the relatively few businesses that survive beyond their founder's generation, even non-agricultural businesses, that's a hard statement to argue with. Succession without an integrated plan may lead to successors unprepared to tackle the tasks expected of them, possibly due to their lack of experience or their unrealistic expectations. Maybe they expected to be the manager and not the manual laborer. No plan may result in a no leader, or possibly the wrong leader taking over. What happens if Dad holds his cards close to his chest and he doesn't share his knowledge? Those gaps may occur. And then what happens if Dad passes suddenly? Lack of communication may result in tension, lack of direction, hurt feelings, and ultimately result in conflict. And then of course there's always those financial concerns that may add to all of these challenges. So how many of you currently have children or other family members working in your operation? Okay. Great. Well, you may agree that this is what we envision for our families for generations to come. But this is what we fear. Now, even though it rarely comes to blows, the combination of family and business brings its own unique set of challenges. As if the everyday kind of workplace issues weren't enough to cause friction. Throw in all those emotions associated with family, such as love, fear of rejection, resentment, jealousy, expectations, and entitlement. The stage is set for sibling rivalry. It's practically all a recipe for conflict. So you have your brothers and sisters are working together and you have the sibling rivalry. Well, just wait until the cousins enter the picture. That adds a whole different dynamic. Another major area of strife occurs when the children grow impatient for real power, but the parent isn't anywhere near ready to hand over the reins. Every time I get close to the end zone, Dad moves the goalposts. Does that sound like anybody you're working with? Oftentimes, the successor wants the transition to happen on Monday, and probably before they're the age 50. Whereas Dad maybe thinks a gradual transfer would be better. So, as I mentioned, people have often told me we're all set. and only a question or two later then discover that we're really not all set. So there are three major questions to ask yourself. The plan that you have, is it comprehensive? How often do you revisit it? And has it been fully implemented? You're very busy people, and it takes a lot of time to do some of these things. So first of all, was it comprehensive? Has your succession plan been integrated with your estate, with your retirement, or your survivorship plans? Do you even have those plans? Do you have an advisory team that you work with? And were they included in the development process of the plan? Now, remember, just having a will is not having a succession plan. Another component that is often forgotten is that you should never take action without knowing the long-term impact of your personal financial situation and that of other family members involved in the operations. It's critical that you have concrete information on how various transfer options may affect you and your family, not only short term, but also 10, 20, or 30 years from now. Obvious as it may sound, when we first meet with clients, many are unaware of the long-term financial consequences of the succession plan that they implemented 5 years ago. They think everything is set, when in fact, they may have a problem and they don't even know it. We've often found that farm owners often face another problem. Since they don't have a good sense of their overall financial picture, they put off planning because they aren't sure that they can afford to transfer the farm. Will they have sufficient income to maintain their lifestyle? So, how do you know if you can afford to transfer the farm? Well, the first step is to determine your future financial needs. And then consider the alternatives based upon the analysis. So there are 18 ways you can transfer a business, and each method differs according to the income, where your equity should be held or owned, and how much control should or should not be retained. So a comprehensive plan evaluates which method applies in each individual situation. So you say you have a plan. How often is it reviewed, either by you, your successors to be, or your advisors? Because there's one thing for certain, I'm sure you know this, is that things will change. Laws regarding income and estate taxation change, as they did here in New York State earlier this year. Laws regarding business entities change. Planning techniques that are available today may be different tomorrow. Of course, family dynamics change. And your business grows, shrinks, maybe it morphs into something else. If you've had a plan developed, who was in charge of implementing it? And did it happen? Were legal documents developed, or were you sold a product that said, you're all set? And then the question becomes, also, when was the last time that your lead advisor coordinated a meeting of all your advisors to discuss your financial well-being? Was it you? And if it was, is that really where your time is best spent? Are you the best person to be coordinating these meetings? And is that your area of expertise? Finally, you say that you've got a plan. Or that you say you're all set. Well, let's ask some questions. And I'll just go through these real quickly. Does our operating or buy-sell agreement encompass death, disability, departure, divorce, deadlock, disagreement, or default? And if any of that happened, and you have an agreement, and you are implementing the agreement, can you afford to do that without jeopardizing the operation? At your death, would the land stay with the active farm family members, or were non-active farm members inherit the land? And if they did, and your neighbor came by and offered your non-active members, family members a great price for the land, could they sell? And what would be the impact upon the operation? What expectations should you have for an adult child that's decided to return to the farm? And what expectations should they have? Would you and your spouse be able to retire and still take income from the farm without causing a cash crunch for your successors? Do you have enough resources to retire without further income from the farm? Can the farm accommodate more family members? And if you needed skilled nursing care, would your spouse and the business be okay? Or what are your choices for paying for that care? So, a plan that's not comprehensive, has not been updated, or is unimplemented or partially implemented, can result in a train wreck. Are you one waiting to happen? So if you've done something that could negatively impact your family or your business, wouldn't you want to know? So what should you do? Review your plan with a professional. Call it a sanity check if not anything else. Then update the plan to be current with the business changes, with law changes and family dynamics. And then finally, implement it. To give you an overview of the financial planning process used by Lincoln Financial Advisors, Agribusiness Services. The process starts with you and an informal conversation just to help us understand how we may best help you. Then we host a family meeting where we introduce everyone involved with the farm to the process. And we help determine common interests, common concerns, and we help establish common objectives. We then meet with each individual family unit, and we talk with them about their individual concerns and their individual objectives. We also gather the data and the documents that we need for our analysis. Then, using our proven process, dedicated team of professionals, we will work hand in hand with you to create and implement your customized financial plan. We then review your financial plan on an ongoing basis, because as you know, things will change. We want to make sure that the benefits of planning will stand the test of time. We believe that when done well, a succession plan will not only positively impact you, but it'll help your families, it'll benefit your operations, including your customers, your business partners, your employees and their families, even your lenders, and finally the community. If you remember nothing else about this presentation, remember that farm and agribusiness succession planning should center around 3 key planning priorities. Providing for your personal financial security means identifying what your needs and objectives are and what assets you'll have tomorrow. Now, you'll have available now and in the future to provide for those needs. That's the first thing. Then only after you're confident that you know what's necessary to provide for your financial security should you implement a financial plan to transfer the operation. Then your third priority should be to minimize the impact of taxation so that your family, your operation, and those that depend upon it will not be unduly burdened. As you know, and I'm sure hope your sons and daughters learn, farming is more than a business. It is a way of life, and pride permeates everything, and there's a basic respect for each other. So I'd like to tell you a little story about myself. This farm looks a little different than some of the farms around here. This is the old farm taken back probably in the early 80s. I grew up in northwest Iowa, and we grow soybeans, corn, and hay. We had feeder cattle, and we farrowed and finished pigs. And at one time, we had over 1,000 acres of rich farmland. My parents have 4 children, and all of us were active 4-H members. We helped with the hay baling in the summer. We did chores before and after school, and we learned the benefits of hard work. That is something that we've all called upon and has benefited us throughout our lives. And oh yes, we also learned to check the soles of our shoes before we got on the school bus each morning. So now, while none of us have remained on the farm, every year we return to the farm with our children to strengthen the connection with each other and with our family history. Last December, Mom and Dad celebrated 56 years of marriage. And then last May, my mother passed away. Her funeral procession took her by the farm, the house, and the land that she's lived on, loved, and where she's raised a family for the last 50 years. Just so she could have one last look before she went to her final resting place. And I have to tell you, while the hearse and the following procession were going down the road to the farm from the church, neighbors in their fields, this was in May, so neighbors out in their fields stopped their tractors and stood and saluted the procession. So now, my father and my father's still farming, and the farm through the years is one of those that has morphed into something else as well. We're working together to preserve and protect the farmland in the family, and within the next 15 years, it's going to be a century farm. Now, although we know family members that actively farm the land after my father, we plan to retain its ownership, so that my siblings and I, our children and our grandchildren, will continue to have that connection to the roots of our family. And who knows, maybe one of the grandchildren will decide to return to the family farm. We can always plan and hope, and of course it all remains to be seen. So, you may be asking yourself, do we need a planner to help with our succession plan? And I hope this presentation has helped you decide, because we bring to the table experience, both personal and through our previous engagements. We bring knowledge, such as training in estate, retirement, and succession planning. We bring continuous education, so that we keep our knowledge up to date as the world around us changes. And in our case, we bring access to a large planning group in a Fortune 500 company composed of former attorneys and accountants that augment our personal capability. So that completes my presentation. And I'm hoping that you have questions, because we certainly can try to answer them for you. And again, but if you have some personal questions, we'd be happy. There's a number of us here. We'd be happy to talk with you individually afterwards. So, also, we're going to be here after the next presentation and through lunch as well, so you can speak with us then. So, Bill, do you want to come on up? So, as I mentioned, Bill Wright is the Director of Lincoln Financial Advisors Agribusiness Services.
Questions, anyone?
Do we have a microphone maybe for Bill in case there's... I'm sorry. Okay. So does anybody have any questions? Yeah, maybe not. Oh, yes, sir.
One of the biggest challenges in transferring farm ownership is the fact the U.S. government gets involved. We're talking $1 million plus operations in today's sizable dairy, I'm thinking in New York State, with cash crop operations as well. How do we remedy some of this taxation problem that the government throws at our transfer of family farm operations, family consisting of probably father and 2 or 3 sons, but maybe up to 10 or 12 hired men? Comments?
Well, the answer would be that
The IRS created the problem, but it also gave us the solutions. So there are a variety of techniques you can use today. Some of them vary state by state, where we can transfer property, we can transfer equipment, we can transfer operations, depending on the entities that's being used. There's basically 18 ways we can do it. And depending on the state we're in, what state taxation issues or gifting issues are involved, or sale issues, we look at the variety of transfer options. And really, a transfer is either a gift or a sale, or some combination of the two. So we go state by state. What are the rules? What can we play with? How do we separate the farm operation? We try to isolate land, try to isolate equipment, isolate the operation. What's the cash flow between the three? How they play out? Determining what we can transfer from one generation to the other. Today we can transfer federally $10.5 million. That's a pretty good sized farm. There are farms bigger than that out in the Midwest where we do some other things out there as well. But here in New York, that covers an awful lot of farms here in New York. There's a lot of things we can do in New York today that will get around New York State's estate tax rule, which is a really goofy rule. If you read what was actually passed by the governor recently, it protects a certain group of farmers up to a certain size. The minute you go over that size, it wipes out your credit, takes you all the way back to zero, and you're taxed from $1. A lot of people, especially farmers, don't understand the way the law was written. It only protects a certain group of farmers. So we look at that rule and how do we play in New York. What things can we do here in New York that are tax advantage to you? What things can we do that'll protect the federal government? Because you're right, the government's way too involved in the ability of one farm to go from one generation to the next. So our first concern is, do you have a successor? And if you do have a successor, is that the successor a child? And if so, do we then have active versus inactive children to deal with? Once we've identified all of those issues for you, then we look at tax strategies we can employ today to determine, are you financially capable of maintaining your lifestyle without income from the farm or rent from the land? And if so, what technique is then possible for us to move from one generation to the next? So this is all we do. We are deeply involved in it. We're working on about 7 or 8 different farm families right now. Every one of them is unique. It's our ability to understand you as a family. What are you trying to accomplish? Who is your successor? What are the emotional ties? What are the financial needs? To dig deep into that issue. So you raised the number one question. How do we keep the government out of our life?
The other thing too is flexibility is key, because the government always finds something else to do and they have to justify their time. And so, you know, as we said, the things change. And so when we do make plans, we need to make sure that those plans will hold up for the long run. But we also need to revisit those on an occasional basis just to make sure that's still happening.
We spend a lot of time building 3-generation plans. From current generation, perhaps someone in your age group, to the next generation, but also recognizing that that generation may have children that they're hoping will eventually get an education around me, they'll come back to the farm on some level. So we're constantly looking at 3 generations. In a traditional business, we're often just looking at 2 generations, father, mother to child. In farming, we're not. We're looking at 3, sometimes 4 generations. It's not unusual that the person that employs us is generation 3 or 4. We have one now where the generation we're waiting for is generation 7. We make that pathway for them. And they're not old enough yet, they're in their teens. But the parents are sure that, you know, children raised on the farm, one of them out of 4 will come back to the farm. That's probably the case. So we have to look through that pathway of setting those standards so that generation 7 can be back, hopefully better educated than generation 6, and maybe more advanced than generation 5. But we have to set that pathway and give them an avenue to get there. And that's, for us, it's a challenge. It's the challenge that drives all of us to do that. We love doing it.
Any more questions? I'd like to also say, just following on what Bill just mentioned about successor generations, is that you think, well, you know, those charts where they show how it's passing to the next generation doesn't really apply to me because now we're in generation 3 or we're generation 4, so we complete that hurdle. Well, there's always new hurdles being put in place, unfortunately. And so the need for planning doesn't go away just because you've inherited grandpa's farm and you're doing well. You gotta think, you gotta still plan because, you know, we're all human, we all make mistakes. And that's just the nature of the beast. And things change. So still the need for planning doesn't go away.
Every farm we have, we build a land schedule. And when you look at the land schedule, every parcel of land has somebody's name attached to it. So we have the Jones Farm, the Smith Farm, the Roberts Farm, the Wright Farm. They're all named there. And sometimes there's as many as 10, 12 parcels of land that they've acquired over time, which is why they're successful. That just tells us how many farmers went out of business. How many farmers didn't do this and the family had to sell the land. So if your passion is about the land, and your family history is about the land, we understand that, we get it, totally. It's her family's history, her family cares about the land, they're not farming it, but they go back to the land, keep that connection to the
But we're
land.
still farming it today. My dad's still happy.
Any other questions we can help you with today?
Okay, well, great. And just as a reminder, please, I would appreciate if you would pass your contact cards to my colleagues here. And then also come and make sure you visit our booths again here at the Dairy Profit Seminar tent and back at the Northwest Main tent. It's not supposed to rain today, but you know, go enjoy the rest of the day, and thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for coming in. Tell them we're sure, get your contact cards for him. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Diane. We appreciate the information. Thanks. We're taking a slight break here. We'll fire up again at 10:30 with the next part of our program. And we thank you for being here. Be sure to be here at 10:30.